صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا ابن رسول الله يا مظلوم يا غريب كربلاء يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one must challenge themselves every single day. Because one who seeks Allah acknowledges that they are constantly in what we refer to as al-jihadul akbar, the greater jihad, the greater war. Because the minor jihad, the one in the battlefield, ends once the battle ends. But the greater jihad occurs until your dying moment. And you are constantly in between two camps, Junud al-Shaytan and Junud al-Rahman, the soldiers of Satan and the soldiers of the Merciful One. And at all times, both are trying to pull you towards them. On this path, in order for you to go towards Junud al-Rahman and away from Junud al-Shaytan, one must cleanse their heart, make sure it's sound from all blemishes, otherwise it's likely that it becomes encompassed and overwhelmed by the darkness, and then it goes towards Junud al-Shaytan. So we want to have a fertile ground for our journey towards Allah. We want to have al-qalb as-salim. We want to have a sound heart, a heart free of blemishes. And truthfully, the journey to Allah really starts to take over once you begin to acknowledge that the one that you have always loved is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That everything around you that you've interacted with has been just a mirror of the reality. And that we sometimes get mixed up. We misidentify the mirror for what we love. And so one must begin to know themselves on this path. And to know oneself, we look at the different dimensions of yourself, of your one self. And the reason why it's really important that we understand that yourself is only one, and it's not parts, in the same way that when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not part Rahman, part Rahim, part Qawi, He's just Allah. And we identify these different attributes of His, but they're all one essence. When it comes to you, the human being, we want to say that yourself is not made up of separate parts when we talk about your nafs and your body and your mind and your fitrah. So your aql, your intellect, your fitrah, which we can say is your heart or whatever else, innate nature, and your jasad, your badan. These three things, I don't want us to regard them as different parts of myself. You are made up of ajza, but I'm saying we don't want to say that part of me is my mind, and part of me is my body, and part of me is my heart or my fitrah. Why? Because you yourself don't refer to yourself in that way. And you have to understand this in order to know Allah, because you have to know yourself to know Allah, as we've been discussing every single day. So to know yourself, you must know that these are not separate parts of you. The reason why this is so important is because if you're lacking in one of them, it means you're lacking in all of them. If you're lacking in your intellectual progress, you're also going to lack in your spiritual progress with your fitrah and your physical progress. It all comes together to affect you. That's why all the parts of you must be in harmony. Rather than calling them parts, I would call them dimensions of the one you. Because when you refer to yourself, you don't say I, you don't say my mind thinks, you don't say my stomach is hungry, you don't say my heart loves. You say I love, you say I think, and you say I'm hungry. You refer to yourself always as one entity. You don't separate yourself into parts. Sometimes someone comes and says, I can't focus in my salat, or I can't focus in my prayer. And they expect a sort of spiritual advice. But it's not always a spiritual issue. Sometimes it might be a physical issue. Sometimes it might be, well, if you're not focusing in your salat, is all the money you're making from halal means? And what you're eating from is halal? Or are you eating too much? Or too little? Or not? That can affect your salat. Even though it was something to do with your physical body, it can affect your prayer. Or if you haven't paid your khums, and then your money is not cleansed, that can affect your prayer. Okay, and that's something to do with not necessarily when we think about my spiritual standing. That can block you spiritually. If your mind is super stressed, your mind and your intellect is overcome, that can also affect your prayer. It can affect your body. We know that for sure. Science tells us that if you want to have a good physique, then you have to find a way to get rid of stress. Because stress is a big reason why a lot of people are actually overweight, not because they eat too much. So it's from your mind. Same thing with the spirit. Same thing with the heart. So let's look at these different dimensions of self. We know very well what the body does. We have a lot of interaction with our bodies. But when it comes to the mind or the intellect's function is to bring you towards certainty, because that's when you are removed from anxiety. When you are certain, that's the hadith, how it went. When you are certain, you are at peace and you are at rest. It's when you're in doubt that you have sadness and sorrow and grief. The intellect is that which brings you certainty and that which differentiates between wrong and right. That's what the intellect is. That's what we use it for. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, Shaitan tries to misguide the intellect. The intellect is your compass. The intellect is what takes you towards the right path. Because you say, okay, this is the right way. This is where I'm supposed to go. That's what the intellect does. But the intellect can't move towards the right way. That's the weakness of the intellect. Your mind can calculate and analyze where I'm supposed to go, but it can't take you there. But in the beginning, you should know where you're supposed to go. What can take you there, what is the engine of the self, is the fitrah. That's the magnet that you have inside you. That's when you start to love something or repel from something. Your fitrah loves perfections and it repels from anything that it sees lacks perfection, or it repels from ugliness, or it repels from ignorance. It repels from the opposite of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically. It repels from that. The problem with the heart though, or the fitrah, is that it can't identify what is actually perfect. So it can be tricked. So it just moves. What I mean by that is, if the heart begins to love a mirror, or begins to love wealth, mistaking wealth for the wealth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then it loved money, it's going to go towards money. So it needs the intellect to say, no, money is not al-ghani, Allah is al-ghani, and this is a means of your sustenance from God. So the intellect and the heart have to be aligned. But the problem is, a lot of the time, when shaitan starts to play his games, shaitan start to decorate they start to confuse the intellect and they start to confuse the heart. You know, the prophets didn't come to take us to God. The prophets came just to point towards where God is, basically to help the intellect. The heart is what takes you to God on its own. It's already there. The engine is there. If it's healthy, it takes you there. But we get mistaken a lot of the time. Insan never has enough and start to regard themselves in this world as someone who might live forever and starts to accumulate as if they live forever. And we know that we won't live forever. And we see the proof of this all around us. But we still, for some reason, live day to day as if we live forever. And we gather all the things around us as if we live forever. Like the story of the king who had a great and vast kingdom, and the joker who comes into his kingdom. And kings usually, they bring jokers just to entertain them. And the joker told the king, if you were sick to a point that you needed water, and there was no water in the land, and you're going to die of thirst, would you give me half your kingdom for a cup of water? And the king said, I would. I'd give you half of my kingdom for a cup of water if there was no water in the land and I needed it, and I was thirsty and I was sick. He said, what if you were so sick that you could not go to the bathroom? Would you also give me half your kingdom in order to go to the bathroom and urinate, and you couldn't do it otherwise? And the king said, if that was the only way, yes, I'd give you half of my kingdom. So he said, how much is this kingdom worth that you'd give me a cup of water and a cup of urine for it? That when you need it, when you think about it, this is something very basic that we use all day. But we live our lives accumulating, and we'll never have such a kingdom, but we try to accumulate it and we forget the big picture. So the heart can be deceived and the mind can be deceived. And so we need assistance, we need planning on the path. And so we're trying to propose a plan of ilm, iman, arfan. That we begin with knowledge, and we can't make it without knowledge. And we broke down what knowledge is, that we're receiving it at all times. And in order for us to go beyond just knowledge, because knowledge has a weakness, which is that you don't always apply what you know. In order to go beyond that, we need to have iman, which is when the knowledge enters the heart and remains in the heart. And to do that, we need amal salih. Amal salih is good action. Good action, for us to have this good action be rooted and engraved in us, the same way knowledge will be rooted and engraved in us, we want to achieve a level of mastery with that good action. So it's something that takes a lot of repetition, as you mentioned yesterday. You have to keep doing it again and again and again, so that you no longer even think about that good action. It just becomes a part of you. It becomes a part of your khuluq and how you respond to the adversities of life. And in that we have a great example in our blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. When Rasulullah returned to Mecca with all the Muslims, and the Quraysh at the time, who were kuffar, who had attacked him constantly, who Abu Sufyan had brought to attack him constantly in Badr, Uhud and Khandaq, who they killed his beloved uncle Hamza and killed several of his companions in Uhud, about 70 of them. This Quraysh that had terrorized the Prophet for years upon years in Mecca and again in Medina, finally the Prophet now was able to overcome them. He comes back to Mecca. Abu Sufyan is taken as a prisoner. He walks in and he tells the people, whoever comes towards these white flags, the Muslims entered with white flags, whoever comes towards the white flags is safe. Whoever goes and sits by the Kaaba is safe. Whoever leaves their weapons and comes towards 1, 2, 3, 4, so and so, fulan wa fulan, is safe. So that no one is going to be killed and there is no retribution or vengeance. In fact, the Prophet actually told some of the worst of people that all they had to do to be safe was become a Muslim or leave. You either join us or you leave. But we're not going to kill any of you. Okay, and they say that Islam was spread by the sword, that the Prophet spread it by the sword. Literally, these were the worst of people to Rasulullah. They couldn't have done anything worse to him. You know, if we were to explain all the atrocities that were committed against the Prophet, he says, there's no Prophet that was hurt like I was hurt. And yet he comes back to Mecca and he tells them that there will be no vengeance. You either leave or you submit to Islam. And so, many left and many submitted to Islam. Abu Sufyan was freed, submitted to Islam. They were known as the Tulaqa after that. They became Muslims after the conquest of Mecca. After this conquest, this is already showing the forgiveness of Rasulullah, which is a khuluq. Right? This is when good action is engraved and rooted in your heart now. That you often respond to the worst of the worst with al-husn, with goodness. The Prophet then goes on a conquest towards Hunain. There was an army in Hunain that was coming to attack the Muslims. The Prophet goes to Hunain. This time the Quraysh also follow. In this battle, it's very much like the Battle of Uhud. Many Muslims leave. Once again, Imam Ali alayhi salam stands firm. He motivates the rest of the Muslims, and they're able to conquer the people, the army in Hunain. What's interesting is after the battle, the Prophet gathers the booty of the war. All the different animals, the sheep, the goats. And usually those would be dispersed amongst the warriors that they gained after the war. He gives them all to who? To the Quraysh. He gives all the animals to the Quraysh, to Abu Sufyan and to Muawiyah. As they're coming back towards Mecca, the Prophet's army, the Muslims that were with him before Mecca, they're known as the Ansar and the Muhajirun. The Ansar, the people of Medina, the indigenous people of Medina, they were speaking amongst themselves. They were saying, how come Rasulullah gave away all of the animals to the Quraysh? Could he have gone back to the tribal mentality? Could he have favored his own people? Because Rasulullah is from Quraysh, even though they hated him. Maybe he has regarded the Quraysh as his people now that they've joined Islam. They doubted him. They've been with him for a decade and they doubted him. They doubted him to this extent. They doubted his akhlaq, his characteristics and his khuluq, his own people. So they start to discuss and they think, this is not fair. The Prophet hasn't been fair to us. The Prophet is not fair. So one of them goes to Rasulullah and tells him. Rasulullah is surprised. He said, do they all feel this way? And the man becomes a little bit shy. He says, yes, they all pretty much feel that way. That you've been kind of unfair with us. We've been with you all this time. And you didn't acknowledge that now. You appreciate them more than us. So the Prophet said, call them all. So they gathered the Ansar. This was on the way back. He goes, he sits down with the Ansar. He doesn't allow anyone else to come. It's just him and the Ansar. And he sits with the Ansar and he tells them, speak to me, what's bothering you? And they say, Ya Rasulullah, we've been with you this whole time and we're a bit surprised that you gave all the animals to the Quraysh. And so this must really hurt the Prophet, to be doubted by his own people that he's been with for all this time, Muslims. They're doubting him. They're saying that he's being one of the people that follow nepotism. Okay? So he's applying nepotism, that he's preferring his own kin over others. This is Rasulullah, who doesn't do any of that, has no such characteristics. And the reason why I'm telling this story is because as you start to follow this path, and you will constantly be in situations where people are trying to keep you in the box that you were in before, or put you in a new box that you really want to get away from. And it's going to hurt you a lot because you're trying to be different. Right? So 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and someone says, oh, you're still that guy that does so and so, it hurts you. Rasulullah responds to them. He tells them, O people, O Ansar, were you not a divided people? Because they used to be at each other's throats. They were two different tribes. He says, were you not a divided people? And I brought you together and I made peace between you. And they said, Bala ya Rasulullah, you did. Then he said, were you not a misguided people? And you had nowhere to turn to. You didn't know what you were following. And I guided you. And they started to feel shameful. He's starting to remind them. And they say, Bala ya Rasulullah. And some of them start to cry. He says, were you not a poor people? And then you became wealthy through me? They said, Bala ya Rasulullah. And they start to cry now, all of them. So Rasulullah then tells them to stop. He says, wait, why are you crying? Shouldn't you tell me, Ya Rasulullah, when you had no people? He is telling them this now. He said, why don't you tell me, when you had no people? Did we not become your army? And then they start to cry more. Look how he's making them not feel any shame. He's removing the shame from them, but he's allowing his message to be sent. His message is received, but he's taking the shame away from them. He doesn't want them to feel shame. He says, O Ansar, when I had nowhere to go, why don't you tell me that you gave me your homes? This is the Prophet telling them that. And they start to cry more. You see the characteristic, he's even thinking about what they're feeling even after they hurt him. Then he says, O people of Ansar, I saw the people of Quraysh have weak Iman. They don't have Iman. So I thought, let me try to bring them closer to the deen with dunya. Let me give them the animals and try bring them closer. I thought you had Iman. I thought you don't need that. And I thought that your reward was greater because I was going to Medina with you. That you get to go to Medina. They can go with sheep, but you can go with the Prophet. I thought that was enough. And they cried more. Notice the genius of Rasulullah. How he wins the hearts of the people in this way without making anyone feel shame, whilst bringing love. And you don't think they loved him more after this? You love him more after this. You love your leader more after this. Because it's in a way, he made you feel like, okay, he understands. But at the same time, don't do this, but without scolding them. That's with characteristics of khuluq. That's with his description of Iman. You see? So for those with less Iman, he was going to give them dunya. When the Prophet, when he went to Ta'if, this is many years before. This is before the Muslims were so strong. This is in Ta'if, which is described as one of his most difficult days, even more than the day of Uhud. Ta'if occurred around the 8th year after Hijrah. In Ta'if, it happened just after Rasulullah had lost Abu Talib and lost Sayyidah Khadija, alayhum as-salam. So you guys know they died in the same week, his two most beloved people. And he called the entire year Aam al-Huzn. Okay, the year of sorrow. After he lost Abu Talib, it was very difficult for him to remain in Mecca. He had no backbone, no protection. It was time for him to move on from Mecca. But before Medina, he was trying to find where can he go. So he decided that Ta'if was a place that they could go to and try to guide the people in Ta'if. Ta'if was about a 3-day journey away from Mecca. He goes with Imam Ali alayhi salam and with Zayd. Zayd, who Rasulullah raised. They call him Zayd al-Hub, because how much Rasulullah loved him. Zayd, Imam Ali and Rasulullah, they mount their camels and they begin their journey towards Ta'if. They go towards Ta'if, 3-day journey. Imagine how much effort they put into this now to guide the people. He's not getting anything out of this. And it takes a long hike to get up the mountain into Ta'if. And they take the hike. Once they get into town, Rasulullah starts to call the people. He wants to go towards the chiefs of the tribe. He begins with the chiefs. He goes, knocks on the door, they open the door. He introduces himself. I'm Muhammad, the son of Abdullah from the Banu Hashim of Quraysh. I've come to tell you of a message. And as he speaks, all they do is laugh. They laugh and they call him a liar. And some people call him a poet. And some call him a magician and a sorcerer. And they say, put your fingers in your ears when he comes and speaks to you. This is the chosen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say, put your fingers in your ears when he speaks to you. And they close the doors. They close all doors on him. And he's feeling like a gharib in this land. Okay? This is when you feel really lonely and you feel like the world's coming down on you. It's your prophet and your imam went through it way before you did. You can find real solace in that thought because you have a connection to what they felt for real. That's why I wanted to cite this story today, because it has so many parallels with Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. The Prophet in this town begins to speak Islam to the people. He leaves the chiefs. He says, let me speak to the people about Islam. He starts to go around and speak to the people about Islam. Again, because everyone said, put your fingers in your ears. No one pays him any attention until a delegation comes to him after his journey of 3 days and he has nowhere to go. He can't even really do anything in Mecca anymore. It's been 8 years and he's made not much progress. And they tell him, we don't want you here. Leave. The delegation tell him, you're not welcome in this town. You're not welcome in this land. Leave. Take your men and leave. So Rasulullah looks at Imam Ali alayhi salam and Zayd and tells him, let's pack up. Let's leave. As they pack up their stuff and they start to leave, on the way out, they line up the children. The people of Ta'if line up their children along the outskirts of the city. And as Rasulullah leaves, all the children hold pebbles and stones and rocks. And they all start to throw the rocks towards the Prophet. The Prophet is in the middle. Imagine children. And the Prophet is a noble man. He's 48 years old on this day. And he's a noble man and a Prophet of Allah. He's walking and children are throwing stones and their parents are watching. Rasulullah walks. Zayd and Imam Ali keep trying to get in the way. A boulder actually hits Zayd on the head. His head's wounded, blood comes down. Imam Ali is trying to block the stones. Rasulullah tells him stop. He begins to walk faster. Imagine Rasulullah walking faster with his head down and they start bleeding. And in some of the reports it says that the blood reached into their sandals and it dried up. How much blood there was. When it becomes sticky. They kept walking fast with their heads down and rocks coming at them. They leave the city. Once everything becomes quiet, Rasulullah is bloodied. He sees a tree. There are no more people, no more children. Rasulullah here leaves Imam Ali alayhi salam and Zayd and goes and sits by the tree. He sits under the tree and then he begins to recite a really beautiful dua. One of the most beautiful du'as that you'll find. And it's a dua to be recited in a time of desperation where you really, really feel like a gharib. Inside you feel like a gharib. No one understands you. No one knows what you're going through. And you can't get your message out. And you feel really alone. You remember Rasulullah when he sits under this tree and he recites this dua. And then he says, Ilahi ila man takiluni. He says, Lord, who are you going to give me to? Because notice in this moment how helpless he feels. He has nowhere to go. You know what this sounds like? It sounds like a young baby, a child, the way that I give a child to you to hold. It's like this. He says, Lord, who are you going to give me to? Like, I have no say. Ilahi ila man takiluni. Ila qaribin fayaqta'uni. Will you give me to someone close to me, but that will cut me off? Like Abu Talib and Khadija, they left. right? You can go to your close ones, but they're going to leave. Everyone will leave you. Everyone will leave you. Everyone. As much as you love them, because even death has to make them leave you. Will you give me to someone who's close to me but will leave me? Or will you give me to someone who is far from me like these people? Am ila ba'idin yatajahamuni, but who are like fire to me, who come to hurt me, who wish nothing but harm upon me. Who are you going to give me to? Ila man takiluni. Lord, who are you going to give me to? If this is happening because you're upset with me, because you're angry with me, then I can't handle that. Then do whatever is necessary for that not to be true. But if this is happening and you're not upset with me, and you're not angry with me, la ubali, then it's okay. Then whatever must come can come. As long as you are content with what I'm doing, with my actions, فَإِلَى غَيْرِكَ لَا تَكِلْنِي. So Lord, all I ask is you give me to none other but you. Don't hand me over to none other but yourself. Only you. Ilahi ila man takiluni, ila ghayrika la takilni. Don't give me to anyone else. Do you know who else says these words? In Dua Arafah, Imam al-Husayn says these words. He says the words of his grandfather in the moment of loneliness. They take your heart to Abu Abdullah's heart. Ilahi ila man takiluni. Who are you going to give me to? To a close one that will leave? They all left. They didn't want to leave, but they had to. Or to those who are far from me, but are going to act like fire upon me. Like the 30,000 acted like a fire upon him. Just don't hand me to anyone but you. You know, on the day of the battle, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was in the battle against the enemies, against the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, and a man from the army was struck down and killed. A man's brother from the same army, from Umar ibn Sa'd's army, when his brother is killed, he vows vengeance upon Imam al-Husayn. He says, may all the Arabs curse me if I do not go and take the life of Husayn ibn Ali. He gets out of the tent, he mounts his horse, and he charges into the battlefield, and he sees Imam Husayn in front of him. And he takes his sword out, and on the way, as he's going, his horse trips, and the man drops to the ground. He drops right in front of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. And the Imam came forward and stood, and the Imam has a sword in his hand. It's a battle. And that man looks up, and the Imam sees his face. His face is full of fear and anguish, and anger, and resentment. And the Imam just looks at him. And then the Imam says, oh man, هل لك من حاجة? Do you have a request? And the man looks up and he can't believe it. This is a real narration. I'm not making this up. And the man says, can I go back to the tents? Would you let them come and just take me back? So the Imam looks up and then he says, come and take your soldier back. So they come forward, they take the injured man back to the camp. If Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam literally would spare the life of an enemy soldier at their request, if that was his compassion, that was his mercy for an enemy, what do you think his compassion would be for his lover? How do you think Imam al-Husayn's mercy, how do you think the Imam would react to someone who cried for him once, who cried for him his entire life, who told his children to cry for him, who dressed his children in black, who dressed as black his entire life, who remembered him at every musibah, who remembered him every year, who decorated his house with his name, who named his family members with his name? How would he react to that person? The heart of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam is that heart of compassion. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا ابن رسول الله يا مظلوم يا غريب يا عطشان يا وحيد بكربلاء يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. On the final day, on the 10th of Muharram, on Ashura, Abu Abdullah's camp was without any water. His companions died thirsty. Akbar died thirsty. Aun and Muhammad died thirsty. As Imam al-Husain stood with Abbas by his side, a young boy steps forward and says, "Uncles, my father isn't here, but I'm here. Would you allow me to represent my father Al-Hasan?" Uncle Hussein, you said my turn would come. Abu Abdullah tells him, "My son Qasim, you're the amana of my older brother. It's difficult for me to let you go. Abu Abdullah, let Akbar go." But he couldn't let Qasim go. Qasim went back to the tent. He sat down looking to the ground. His mother Ramla comes towards him. She tells him, "Ya Qasim, did you see what Akbar did? Will you allow for Akbar to go to battle, and the son of Hassan not go to battle. Take this letter written from your father, to be given to you, to give to your uncle on this day. I've carried this letter with me since your father passed, and the day has come. Qasim hugs his mother and takes the letter to Abu Abdullah. He says, Uncle, I have a message for you from my father. Imam al-Husain is surprised. What letter is this, Ya Qasim? He opens the letter and sees the handwriting of Al-Mujtaba. He says, La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day. I wish I was there, Ya Hussein. Take my son Qasim in my place. He will act on my behalf with you and Abbas. The Imam begins to cry and looks down at Qasim. He tells Abu Fadl to bring the armor for Qasim. He embraces Qasim and tells him, say goodbye to your mother, my son. Qasim returns back to the tent, and the woman begins to hug him. And his mother, Ramla, tells him, Qasim, before you go, can you do something for me? Of course, tell me, ask for anything. She says, Qasim, let me hear you say that word one more time. Let me hear you say, Ummah. Call me your mother. He says, goodbye, mother. You raised me from my cradle. You held me. You stayed up in the night with me when I wasn't well. You fed me. You gave me everything from yourself. And now I say goodbye. He says, Qasim, just one more thing. When you see your grandmother Zahra, tell her I also gave my son in Karbala. Qasim hugs his mother. He comes out into see Abu Abdullah. He bids farewell and charges into the battlefield. And Al-Qasim ibn al-Hassan ibn Ali, he begins to fight the enemy soldiers. His courageous young heart putting to shame the cowards of Yazid's army, until his shoe becomes undone as he bends down to buckle his sandal, a Mal'oon strikes his sword down onto Qasim, and they begin to cut him and strike him, and he calls out, Ammar, Ya Husain, adrikni. Ya Abu Abdullah, Uncle Husain, come to my aid. Abu Abdullah charged into the battlefield. He killed the killer of Qasim, and then he sat by the small body cut into pieces, and he wiped the blood from his face, his pure young face. Qasim, the last remnant of Hassan. How it pains me that you called me to help you, and I could not save you from the sword. He carries the small body of Qasim. He goes back to the tent. Zainab sits by the body and kisses his face. But Qasim's mother tries to come forward, and Zainab says, don't come, Ya Allah, but I want to see my Qasim. But Zainab says, they've cut him into pieces. I still wish to see my Qasim. So she came forward and saw the body covered in blood, with Abu Abdullah sitting next to it. And he looks up and he says, oh mother of the Shaheed, I'm sorry. And she says, Ya Abu Abdullah, how can you apologize? All our souls are for you. She sits by the body of her slain son. Remember to tell Zahra what I told you, Ya Qasim. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَى